Anything can happen in a fairy tale or rhyme when we say the magic words, once upon a time. Once upon a time, not long ago, and not very far from here, there was a big group of kids at Big Oak wanting to go on an adventure with Shane. He said, "Everyone, get into my van." They had never been asked to get into his van before, so they all loaded in, and they said, "There's not enough seatbelts for us." And Shane said, "Don't worry, just sit in each other's laps. This shouldn't be a problem." And he picked up his keys, and he dangled the keys, and they all saw something they had never seen before. It was a blue sparkle key. And he said, "We are going on an adventure." He put the blue sparkle key into the ignition, and the car started to rumble and shake, and the children held on to each other. What's going to happen? And the car started to lift up, 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 up into the sky. And the children all went, "Oh my goodness." The car headed to the ocean. They went over land all the way to the ocean. No one spoke. They all just went, "Ah," and "Ah," and "Ooh." And then as they got to the ocean, the car plunged into the water with a big splash. And in a moment, they were underwater. It was clear water for as far as they could see. And the truck was just going and going. They saw a few fish and a few dolphins, and the water was very clear and lovely. And they said, "Here we are underwater, but what are we going to see?" And Shane said, "You will see in a moment. Now that we are underwater, we're going to find something very interesting." So they continued going with bubbles streaking behind them and dolphins swimming past, until they got to a place where the sun was filtering through giant plants. It was a forest of plants. And Shane said, "This is the kelp forest. It is a forest that grows underwater. The California giant kelp grows 1 foot to 3 feet every day. And way down at the bottom, it holds on with a hold fast. That's like a root, but it's a hold fast, and the little sea urchins like to come and eat it. And when that happens, the air bladders that hold the leaves up carry the whole piece of kelp, and it floats away. And if there are too many sea urchins, they will eat too much of the kelp, and there won't be a kelp forest." "What do we do then?" the kids said. "Look," he said, and he pointed to a brown creature that looked a little bit like a cat, but it was swimming. And they were like, "What is that creature?" It was a sea otter. And Shane said the sea otter eats the sea urchins and keeps them from eating all the kelp. And he said the kelp forest is the most magical forest underwater that we have. So we need sea otters to eat the sea urchins so the sea urchins don't eat up the kelp. And the forest is a wonderful, magical place for underwater creatures. It is a nursery. And the children heard this. It's a nursery. And they started looking around at the big kelp blades that were floating in the water, and they noticed that there were all kinds of tiny creatures all over the kelp, and that there were baby fish. And all sorts of creatures, so many more creatures than there were out in the open ocean. And they realized that in the underwater world, the kelp forest is the forest, just like at Big Oak, the oak trees are the forest. In the oak trees, we have hawk and rat and rattlesnake, and in the kelp underwater, we have fish, and we have little crustaceans that live on the fish. We have sea urchin, and we have otter. It is the underwater forest. And they all said, if we didn't go on this magical adventure, I don't know if we would have understood, because we certainly can't tell from the beach. And so they were all so grateful for the amazing adventure. And eventually it was time to go. They said goodbye to the little otters who were swimming, diving down, and getting those tasty little sea urchins to eat. And they said goodbye to the kelp forest that goes so fast every day. And they said goodbye to the underwater forest. And as the car went up through the water and burst into the air, the children were so tired from their exciting adventure that they all fell asleep on each other's shoulders. And if things have not changed, they are still the same today. Anything can happen in a fairy tale or rhyme when we say the magic words, once upon a time. Today's letter is the letter U. U for under water. Under water. The letter U.